Okay, I hope I'm audible to all students who are attending this lecture of introductory microeconomics. Okay, we continue with our lectures on consumer theory. We continue with our lectures on consumer theory, and formally this is chapter 21 of the book I prefer to follow for the introductory microeconomics course, which is Gregory and Mankiw. Okay, I prefer to follow the 4th edition for my lectures. Okay, so in the previous lecture of consumer theory, we were looking at two extreme cases of consumer preferences. One was perfect substitutes and one was perfect complements. And we had learned in the previous lecture that in the case of perfect substitutes, the consumers in difference curves are downward sloping straight lines. And in the case of perfect complements, the consumers in difference curves are L-shaped in difference curves at right angles. Then in the previous lecture, we had also looked at the optimal choice of the consumer. Okay, in the case of simple convex downward sloping ICs, the consumer's optimal choice is given by the condition where the indifference curve is tangent to the budget line of the consumer, which means that at the point of tangency, the slope of the indifference curve, which is MRS, is exactly equal to the slope of the budget line, which is the ratio of PX and PY. Okay, we had looked at all this in the previous lecture of consumer theory. Now in this particular lecture, what do we observe? In this particular lecture, we learn how changes in income, how changes in income, how changes in income affect the consumer's optimal choice. How changes in income affect the consumer's optimal choice. Okay, so guys, we will now look at what will the change in income have an impact on the optimal choice of the consumer. So what will happen to the optimal choice of the consumer when income goes up and when income goes down? Okay, so all students can recall, on the basis of income, on the basis of income, we can classify the goods as, if all of you can recall from the basic demand lecture, okay, on the basis of income, you can classify your goods as normal goods, okay, and you can classify them as inferior goods. Now, if all of you can recall from the lectures on demand and supply concept, which we have covered in our introductory microeconomics course before, what are normal goods? Normal goods are those goods which share a direct relationship with income. So what does this mean, guys? Very simple. This means that if income goes up, demand for normal goods go up, and if income goes down, demand for normal goods also go down. Demand for normal goods also goes down. Okay, now normal goods can be AC, TV, refrigerators. Okay, now again, it varies from person to person. Which good is a normal good and which good is an inferior good varies from person to person. You can't say particularly as to which good is a normal and which good is an inferior good. It varies from person to person. Okay, it varies from consumer to consumer. Okay, so I hope students have understood the definition of normal goods. But if I generally categorize them, you can talk about all goods which have a major proportion of your income, like car, TV, refrigerator. Okay, good quality products, these are all normal goods. When your income goes up, you prefer to buy more of them, you demand more of these goods. And when your income goes down, the demand for such goods also go down. And similarly, guys, on the other hand, we have exactly the opposite, which are the inferior goods. Now, inferior goods are those goods which share an inverse relationship with income. Now, what does that mean? This means that if the income goes up, demand for inferior goods falls. Because guys, if your income goes up, you would want to buy the normal goods and reduce your demand for inferior goods. And if income falls, you reduce your demand for normal goods. Now you will increase your demand for inferior goods. So I can write that demand for inferior goods goes up. So I can say that normal goods, if I conclude, normal goods share direct relationship with income. Inferior goods share inverse relationship with income. Examples of inferior goods will be all the low quality items. Like for example, if I talk about basmati rice, it would be a normal good. If I talk about some low grade rice, it would be inferior good. Okay. If I talk about a smartphone like an iPhone, it would be a normal good. However, if I talk about a mobile phone which is not a smartphone, which does not have all the apps and all, that would be an inferior good. So again these are some examples, but again, which good is normal and which good is inferior varies from consumer to consumer. You cannot universally classify as to which good is normal and which good is inferior. Every person has his own example of normal versus inferior good. Okay, for if a very simple example, if you ask a middle class consumer, for that consumer a Honda City car would be a normal good. But if you ask a very rich businessman, for that particular person the Honda City car would be an inferior good. So we can't universally say as to which good is normal, which good is inferior. It varies from consumer to consumer. Okay, but if we discuss it in general, all the good quality products are mostly normal goods. You prefer to buy, you demand more of such goods when your income goes up. But all the bad quality products which do not have the requisite quality are classified under the inferior type. Such products are demanded less when your income goes up, because when your income goes up, you would want to shift towards normal goods. Okay, so now, having explained to all students the crucial difference between normal and inferior goods, we now look on to the topic. The topic is how change in income affects the consumer's optimal choice. So we have the cases. Let's look at the cases. So case 1. Suppose good X and good Y are normal goods. Suppose good X and good Y are both normal goods, and the income, which we denote by M, and suppose the income of the consumer goes up. Can we plot a diagram and see what will happen to the optimal choice of the consumer? So guys, let's see what will happen to the optimal choice. So to draw the in the diagram, the first thing we draw is the budget line always. So good X on the horizontal axis, good Y on the vertical axis. We always draw the initial budget line first. This is my initial budget line. Okay. My horizontal intercept M by Px, vertical intercept M by Py. Slope of the budget line is minus Px by Py. Recall this from my lectures on budget lines within the topic consumer theory. Okay, this was my budget line. Now when my income goes up, so I can say income goes up to M dash. Suppose my income goes up, or I can write it like this so that students don't get confused. Suppose income goes up from M to M dash. So all students can recall what will happen to the budget line when income goes up. Now you can refer to my previous lectures on budget lines. You can clearly see when income goes up, horizontal and vertical intercepts both go up. Horizontal intercept becomes M dash by Px. Vertical intercept becomes M dash by Py. Slope of the budget line is still minus Px by Py. There is no change. That means both these lines are parallel to each other and budget line shifts out. Now guys, what will happen to the optimal choice? Now suppose on the initial budget line, I was consuming at this point. Suppose this was my initial equilibrium E0 and we were on the indifference curve I0 and our consumption was X0 amount of good X and Y0 amount of good Y. Now guys, when your income has gone up, both good X and good Y are normal. Good X is also a normal good. Good Y is also a normal good. And by definition of normal goods, when your income goes up, you increase your consumption of good X also, you increase your consumption of good Y also. That means guys, your next equilibrium will be at point E1 on the indifference curve I1. Clearly, consumption of good X has also gone up. And clearly the consumption of good Y has also gone up from X0 to X1 and Y0 to Y1 respectively. So what can I say if I just write one line? Clearly an increase in income from M to M dash causes the consumption of both good X and good Y to rise. The equilibrium moves from point E0. The equilibrium moves from point E0 to point E1. And you can clearly see that consumption of good X is also going up, consumption of good Y is also going up. Okay, why? Since both of them are normal. Both of them are normal goods. So you can clearly see that when income goes up, consumption of good X is also going up, consumption of good Y is also going up. So I can say that therefore, when both good X and good Y are normal goods, when both good X and good Y are normal goods, an increase in income raises the consumption of both the goods. An increase in income raises the consumption of both the goods. So I hope students have understood this particular case. Okay, now guys, let's look at case 2. So case 2, when good X is an inferior good, when good X is an inferior good and good Y is a normal good, good Y is a normal good, and price and the income of the consumer goes up, and the income of the consumer goes up from M to M dash. So guys, let's draw the diagram and let's see what is going to be the impact now. So on your screens, you can see again, on the x-axis, we measure good X. On the y-axis, we measure good Y. Now my good X is an inferior good. My good Y continues to remain a normal good. First, we draw the budget line. So initial budget line. Horizontal intercept M by Px. Vertical intercept M by Py. Slope of the budget line minus Px by Py. Now, what happens when income goes up? Very simple. First, always draw all the budget lines first. So when income goes up, what will happen to the budget line? All students know this. Budget line will shift out parallelly to the right. New horizontal intercept M dash by Px, new vertical intercept M dash by Py, and increase in income causes the budget line to shift parallel to the right. Now let's draw the indifference curve. So guys, suppose hypothetically, suppose I was consuming here. Suppose this was my initial equilibrium. I was on indifference curve I0, consuming X0 amount of good X and Y0 amount of good Y. Now when your income goes up, good X now is an inferior good. And all of you can recall, inferior goods have inverse relationship with income. So when your income goes up, demand for inferior goods is going to go down. That means when your income has gone up, demand for good X should fall, but demand for good Y should rise. So where will my indifference curve come? So if I extend this dotted line upwards, my next indifference curve is going to come in this particular segment. Why? Because in the new equilibrium, my good X demand should be less. That means I can draw anywhere on this particular line. So you can see on this brown line. On your screens, you can see the brown line. So on this brown line, I can draw an indifference curve anywhere I want. So I can draw it somewhere here. This is my I1. This is E1. You can clearly see in the new equilibrium, my demand for the inferior good is falling. Good X is my inferior good. And you can clearly see that since good Y is a normal good, demand for good Y is rising from Y0 to Y. On the brown shaded region, guys, you can draw an indifference curve anywhere on this line. Okay, so I hope students have understood that. So if I quickly write this in the form of a paragraph, clearly, when the income of the consumer goes up, when the income of the consumer increases from M to M dash, the budget line shifts parallelly to the right, since good X is an inferior good, since good X is an inferior good and good Y is a normal good, therefore an increase in income reduces the demand. An increase in income reduces the demand for good X and increases the demand for good Y, and increases the demand for good Y. As a result, the equilibrium shifts. As a result, the equilibrium shifts from E0 to E1. So what do we learn? We learn that an increase in income reduces the demand for the inferior good, which in our case is good X, and increases the demand for normal good, which in this case is good Y. So this is what we learned from case 2. Okay, so hoping that students have understood this and have no doubts. Okay, now I request students to try some cases at home. Okay, so try at home. Try the following cases at home. Try the following cases at home. Okay, so it's as follows. Case 1, when both good X and good Y are normal goods. When both good X and good Y are normal goods and income falls from M to M double dash, what will be the impact on optimal choice? Okay, when both good X and good Y are normal goods and income of the consumer falls from M to M double dash, illustrate the impact on the optimal choice. Illustrate the impact on the optimal choice using a diagram. Students are requested to please take this case at home. Similarly, guys, second case, when good X is an inferior good, when good X is an inferior good and good Y is a normal good, and income falls from M to M double dash. Again, illustrate the impact on the optimal choice. Illustrate the impact on the optimal choice using a diagram. So students are requested to draw these diagrams, and you can mail me your answers. You can mail me your answers on my WhatsApp group for this course. You can mail me your answers on my WhatsApp group for the introductory microeconomics course. Okay, so moving forward, guys, now let us see how change in prices affect consumers' choices. How the change in prices, or how the change in price affects consumers' choices. Okay, so we were looking at how change in income affects consumers' optimal choice. Now let's look at how the change in the price of any one commodity affects the consumer's optimal choice. So guys, I can divide my explanation into two diagrams. Case 1, when price of good X, I can write it like this: when the price of good X falls from Px to Px dash, keeping price of good Y and income constant. This is my case 1. Price of good X is falling from Px to Px dash. My Py, which is price of good Y and income, is kept constant. Okay, and then we can have the second case, case 2, when the price of good X rises from Px to Px double dash. Okay, when price of good X increases from Px to Px double dash, keeping Py and income constant. So let's examine both these cases using a diagram, and let's look at the impact on the optimal choice. So if we quickly draw a diagram for the first case, again guys, first always draw the budget lines. So good X on the vertical axis, good Y. Okay, what is my initial budget line? Downward sloping, horizontal intercept m by Px, vertical intercept m by Py, and what is the slope of this budget line? Minus of Px by Py. Now guys, my price of good X is falling, but there is no change in price of good Y and income. So when price of good X is falling, if you all can recall from my lectures on budget lines within the broad topic consumer theory, what will happen to the horizontal intercept? When price of good X falls, you can clearly see that the denominator of the horizontal intercept falls. And if the denominator of the horizontal intercept falls, the whole horizontal intercept will go up. So this is going to be m upon Px dash, and my budget line will shift. It will rotate towards the right. You can clearly see my budget line is going to rotate to the right. Okay, so the slope of this budget line was minus Px by Py. I am writing it again so that there is no confusion to any student. The slope of this budget line is minus Px by Py, and the slope of this budget line is minus Px dash by Py. The slope of this budget line is minus Px dash by Py. What has happened to the slope? The slope has gone down. That means you can clearly see the line has become more flatter. It's making a smaller angle with the x-axis now. Okay, so now guys, what will happen to the optimal choice? What will happen to the optimal choice? So suppose I was consuming somewhere here. This was my initial indifference curve, initial equilibrium, initial amount of good X, and initial amount of good Y. Now, when the price of good X falls, we will definitely demand more of good X than before. Obviously, guys, when good X has become more cheaper, you will demand more of it. But we don't know what will happen to good Y. So we can have various cases. I can be somewhere here. My indifference curve can come here also. My indifference curve can come exactly here also. My indifference curve can come exactly here also. Any of these three cases is possible, but exactly one of them will happen. So basically, if I look at this case, this is the case when both X and Y are increasing. When good X and good Y both are rising. This is the case. This is case 2 when good X is rising and good Y remains unchanged. You can see at this particular point, good Y is the same. And this third one is the case. This is case 3 when good X is rising but good Y is falling. That means what do we learn? When price of good X falls, keeping price of good Y and income constant, the only thing which we can say with surety is that good X will rise. But we can't say what will happen to good Y. Good Y can rise also, which is given by case 1. Good Y can remain constant also, which is given by case 2. Good Y can fall also, which is given by case 3. But in all the cases, what are we learning? In all the cases, we are learning that X is always going up. In all the cases, we are learning that X is always going up. Now, guys, remember, any one of these indifference curves will come. Either you will have this black indifference curve, or you will have this red indifference curve, or you will have this brown indifference curve. Any one of them will happen, guys. All three cannot come because indifference curves cannot intersect each other. Now, for the sake of simplicity and time saving, I have drawn all three cases in one diagram. But you all as students should know that out of these three indifference curves, you will only have one case at one point of time. Okay. Similarly, we can draw another diagram. We can draw another diagram for case 2. Now, what will happen? So again, good X is measured on the horizontal axis. Good Y is measured on the vertical axis. First of all, we draw the budget line. This is our initial budget line. This is budget line AB. Or I can say this is my M by PX horizontal intercept. This is M by PY, which is my vertical intercept. And the slope of this budget line is minus PX by PY. Now, when price of good X is rising and price of good Y and income are kept constant, what will happen to the horizontal intercept? Now you can see my denominator of the horizontal intercept is going up. And if the denominator is going up, the horizontal intercept will fall. So it will fall from M by PX to M by PX double dash. So you can see now my budget line is rotating to the left. Okay, what is happening to the budget line? You can clearly see, guys, it is becoming more steeper now. The slope of this budget line will be minus PX double dash by PY. The slope of the new budget line is minus PX dash by PY. PX double dash by PY. You can see it's becoming more steeper than before. Now what will happen, guys, to the optimal choice? Suppose I was consuming somewhere here. Hypothetically, this is my initial indifference curve, initial equilibrium. Now, one thing we know for sure, when good X is becoming more expensive, so this is my initial X0, when good X is becoming more expensive, we will surely demand less of it now. But we don't know what will happen to good Y. Now, any of the case can happen. So that means, guys, we can have good Y here also. We can have good y here also. Our indifference curve can be here also, and our indifference curve can be here also. So again, we can have three indifference curves: the black indifference curve, the red indifference curve, and the brown indifference curve. Any one of these will come. So you can see this is the case. This is case 1 when both x1 and x2 are, in this case, basically this is the case when x1 is falling, or I can say when good x is falling and good y is rising. If you compare E0 with this point, you can clearly see that good x is falling but good y is rising. This red indifference curve, the red indifference curve corresponds to case 2 when good x is falling, but you can see good y is constant. If you compare this equilibrium with this equilibrium, you can see good y is constant but good x is falling. And this is the third case, case 3, which you can clearly see that good x is also falling and good y is also falling. When you compare E0 with this case, you can see both are falling. That means, what do you learn? When price of good x falls from px to px double dash, the only thing which we can say with surety is that good x, the demand for good x will fall. Whether you go by case 1 or case 2 or case 3. But what will happen to good y is ambiguous. Good y can rise also, good y can remain constant also, and good y can fall also. Okay, so this is where I intend to stop in this particular lecture. Homework for all students based on this particular result. So try at home the following homework. So illustrate the impact on the optimal choice. Illustrate the impact on the optimal choice for the following cases. Illustrate the impact on the optimal choice for the following cases using a diagram. Using a diagram. So guys, on our screen we have case 1. When price of good y falls, keeping price of good x and income constant, you need to draw a diagram which illustrates the impact on the optimal choice. And case 2, when price of good y rises, keeping price of good x and income constant. And then you can send your solutions. Send your solutions on the WhatsApp group. Send your solutions on the WhatsApp group for the introductory microeconomics course. For the introductory microeconomics course. So you can draw the diagrams and you can send your answers. You can click pictures and send them on the group. I can check up your answers. So guys, this is where I intend to stop in this particular lecture. The next lecture of consumer theory is very important because we will now be bifurcating the price effect into two effects called the substitution effect and the income effect. So something which is very important from this course point of view and examination point of view as well. So the next lecture of introductory microeconomics is very important. For this lecture, I stop. Any doubt, you can unmute your mics and ask, or you can call up, or you can mail me your doubts at divineschoolofeconomics@gmail.com. So this is where I stop in this lecture.